Folks, welcome to Los Angeles on the top of Mount Washington. I'm joined today by a dear friend, somebody who I've not been in person with since the beginning of the pandemic, an incredible synthesis and a writer, economist, just all things, really an exemplary cat and a beautiful artist. Dr. Patrick Gleeson, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Did you ever, were you ever involved with the electric tape center or the tape center in San Francisco? Can you talk about that experience? Because I just got hip to, the cat's name is escaping me now, but there was a lot going on.
Oh, yeah.
And so can you talk about,
Sure.
Take me through that.
Well, so how the association started was a couple of dancers from Ann Halpern's Dancers Workshop who asked me to do a score for a dance performance of theirs. And this led me to Ann Halpern's studio, which was also, as it turned out, at least temporarily, the home of the tape center, the San Francisco Tape Center.
It was on Divisadero?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so we did our little thing, and then the dancers took me into this room, and there was this strange machine sitting there. And they said, this is something that these guys are doing. We're not exactly sure, but it's, blah, blah, blah. And of course, it was the very, very first synthesizer built by Don Buchla. And so I was entranced. And also I had become so political that my stay as a professor of English at San Francisco State was not going to be for long.
I don't think I ever even knew that. You were teaching English at San Fran State.
Yeah, and I got political enough that they started a tenure hearing on me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you tenered?
No.
Okay.
This was to get rid of me.
Okay, so you knew you weren't long for that.
Yeah. In fact, what happened was, I found out, my lawyer found out that they had something called the Committee of One. It sounds like a bad 70s spy movie, doesn't it? The Committee of One. And these guys were all the conservatives, and their leader was S.I. Hayakawa, who was by that time the president of the university, and also my ex-roommate, and we hated each other. I mean, when he saw that, as a sign of disrespect in the department, he was assigned not his own office, but sharing an office. As a full professor, he could have normally had an office to himself. They put him with this new assistant professor. And he hated me from the moment I came in with my long hair and beard.
Right, you were doomed from the start.
Doomed from the start. So, and then, several sit-ins and blah, blah, blahs. Later, I was dragged down the steps of the administration building by the tax squad, the police people. And so I was scheduled to be on my way out. There was no way. This was not really a tenure hearing. It was.
It was. Here's the door. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like.
Were you? I don't want to go too off in the deep end, but were you like being inflammatory with the students about what was going on?
No. But I was a public figure, and I spoke in various things, and I.
Really?
Yeah. And.
At the Beans or with
different places.
This is really pretty nervy stuff. It's pretty cool, man.
Yeah. Well.
Is there audio of that? I'd love to hear some of those speeches.
My God, we did. There were no iPhones. There were no,
Right.
But anyway. But nevertheless, people who didn't like it had heard it, and so this whole thing went on, and. When my lawyer, Ephraim Margolis, who was a very, very prominent defense attorney, criminal defense lawyer, who did pro bono work with people like me, and he told me about that they had this committee, and that they had actually had a detective. They'd hired a detective. I don't know what they intended to find, but the weird stuff started to happen. For example, I had a house in Potrero Hill, and I had a little basement apartment I rented out to a young guy and his wife. And I came home one day, and there's these 6 guys in a car. To me, so obvious that they were cops. It was just unbelievable. And I said, "What's going on?" And the guy took me aside, and he said, "These guys are going to give me some money to store some dope for them."
Oh, dear.
I said, "Are you out of your fucking mind?" I said, "What they're going to do is give you that and then bust both of us." I said, "No, tell them no." And so that happened, and these guys drive away. I was like, oh. So this sort of thing went on, and it came to a point where it was just before Christmas. I was not a good husband. It was the 60s, and my wife, as I well deserved, had left me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there in my office. It's Christmas vacation coming up.
Wow.
I thought, you've really had it with this. This is all over. This is a part of your life that you need to move beyond. So I left the key in the office, pulled the office door shut, didn't even take anything from the office, just left it all there, and walked away. I think after the vacation, the dean's assistant called me, a sign of disrespect rather than the dean.
Right.
The dean's assistant called me and said, you're not back in your office and teaching classes? I said, "No, I'm gone." He said, "Well, and I can, the dean can cover for you for a couple of days, but that's it." I said, "Don't bother, it's over." So with that, my second career began.
What kind of, aside from just being an avid fan, musically, and you had taken some piano lessons, where were you at with your musical pedigree at that point?
Well, that's interesting. I took piano lessons from the time I was 6 until I was 14.
Right.
The first 8 years, I guess it was, as a student, taking piano lessons from the Holy Name's nuns at the school where I attended as a grammar school. And then when I graduated from there, my parents looked for a teacher for me. Unfortunately, the guy they found was just, not it at all. And so I also had a very hip cousin.
Mm.
And her boyfriend was Norm Bobrow, who, as it turned out, was one of the influential promoters of jazz and jazz-like music in Seattle. And
really?
Yeah.
What was his name?
Norm Bobrow, Bobrow.
Wow.
So I think when all this came down, Mary knew that I'd quit my piano lessons. And she also knew that I was crazy about jazz, and I'd been reading out of Mary Lou Williams' little piano series for kids. And, really that's what I wanted to do. So the two of them invited me to dinner in Chinatown. And on cue, in comes this, I can't remember the man's name any longer, but an incredible black piano player, jazz piano player. I had seen him in concert several times. I was crazy about it. I'd gone with Mary. He comes by as if, it's just an accident, and he sits down at the table. And so then Mary says, "No, do you ever take students?" And the guy turned, and he was a big man. He looked a little bit,
He was a bebopper,
I wouldn't say exactly bebop. It was before bebop, but it was...
So he was much older than, he was an elder of yours.
Hmm?
He was an elder of yours.
Oh, yeah. He was a grown man.
You can't recall the name, though.
No, unfortunately, I no longer can remember.
So he looked at you, she said, "Do you give lessons?" And what did he say?
Well, he turned to me and looked me right in the face, just direct contact. And of course, when you're young, you're a little shy anyway. And he said, "Well, I never have, but you know what? Why don't you fall by the pad and we'll see what happens." Fall by the pad. I ran home, ran out of the car and got in the house and told my mother, and she was worried. This was culturally way beyond.
Yeah, you were going to absolutely fall by the pad.
Fall by the pad. And here's where my folks at that time They were a little more sophisticated later, but at that time in what would it have been? Let's see.
40 some 50s?
Yeah, but I don't know. Probably 40, 49, something
Yeah.
like that. And our next door neighbor, Mrs. Johnston, had a son who was in the Seattle Symphony. And my parents always felt sorry for Mrs. Johnston. That was what her son did for a living. So you know, when they heard that this well-known black jazz musician, no less, was willing to give me piano lessons, they said, well, we'll only do that if your piano teacher approves. Well, I was you know, $1 a week to the piano teacher. Fuck that shit. And he told my parents, not until he has mastered the fundamentals. And with that, I quit music for 10 years.
So he kind of blackballed you from getting to fall by the pad of the other.
It never happened.
Right. So you walked. So you cut it, and then.
You know, I'm a 13-year-old, 14-year-old
Sure.
kid.
But then you're on faculty at early 20s at San Francisco State. You close the door and you restart the music career.
Yeah. And before then, for the previous year, I had been. Then you asked. This is where we started. This long loop.
Yeah.
You asked about the tape center.
Yeah. Great.
Well, when I was, after I had seen the Buchla at Ann Halpern's studio, then the tape center moved to Mills College. Both, sadly, very sadly, both Mills College is closing. They closed in June, and the tape center is gone forever.
Wait, Mills College closed?
Oh yeah, this was the last year.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, there's good and bad things about things that happen in education, and the fact that you know, women can now, thank God, attend any university that a similarly schooled male can. Then there was less need for a women's college, apparently. You know.
I just want to go back to the Ann Halpern when they first showed you that Buchla synth.
Yeah.
Talk about what was so fascinating for you about that even though it's antiquated now, what did you get off on?
Well, in a way, it's not antiquated. You know, my friend.
Just by years of just
Yeah.
development.
But I was going to say, what is her name? Oh God, the elderly brain. Anyway.
Subotnick, or go ahead. Yeah.
No, it was not Subotnick, but a woman. She's still performing using a Buchla.
Are you kidding?
She last week she was in London performing.
Why don't I know this?
Yeah. So anyway, where were we?
So talk just about that initial giddiness. You got to but at the time before the tape center moved to Mills College.
Yeah.
It was on Divisadero. You walked in and they showed you the Buchla set.
And I realized, okay, I want to do this.
Now, explain how did you know that you wanted to do that?
Well, I hit the key, hit the piano key, and and it's like blah, 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 blah. And one of the dancers said, I don't think we're supposed to do that. So I immediately then I went back to Ann Halpern's to see about the San Francisco Tape Center, which was no longer there. It was now the Mills College Tape Center.
Wow.
And they'd moved. So I went over and I talked to the director. I said, I would like to learn about this. And he said, well, all of us have just taught ourselves. There's some instructional manuals and, there's a lot of demand for this and I don't know how often you can use it. So it turned out at that time they were trying to, all this sounds so funny now because the numbers are so low.
Yeah.
So they were trying to get money to buy a 4-track.
Yeah. There's only 2-track at that time. There's only 2-track.
Yeah, well, they had a 4. I mean, they got a 4-track because I gave them $1,000 toward that 4-track, in exchange for which they gave me one night a week. So
Brilliant.
I could come in at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and stay until dawn, and then take my motorcycle and cycle back over to San Francisco State and then teach. So that's where that was at.
So so hold on. So when you first got hip to the music center or to to the booklet, you still were teaching. This was
Yeah,
before
oh
you
yeah,
left.
oh
Okay.
yeah, definitely.
So you were burning the midnight oil till dawn,
Yeah.
creating.
And then being political, you know, when you're young, you got a lot of energy.
Yeah, no sleep really. Yeah. So continue.
So, well, that's pretty much the story. I mean, and then the whole thing at Christmas of whatever, I think it was 67 to 68 or 68, I think 68, 69 maybe.
Yeah, because it's somewhere along the line right after that
I-
is when Zance and those cats gave you a record, or were trying to get you a record deal.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And so,
You know what I wanted to? This is what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
The early, as best you can remember. I'm not sure if you even have any. If you ever, you know, in jazz, like within the group context of a conversation, when cats leave the head of the tune, they never really play the same solo. They never play the same song the same way once. Is it applicable with synth creation?
yeah.
Can
Well,
you talk?
depends who you're talking to.
Okay.
You know, I mean, the rock guys did it a different way, which was equally valid.
What did they do? It just kind of
Well,
more linear.
You know, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I mean, that they would play tunes, and the whole tune would be pretty much scripted out.
Locked in, yeah.
Yeah, and the way it was with Herbie, you know, there are 6 guys that are not going to give an inch to me. You know, I mean, well, Herbie did his best, but so I had to follow them. You know, so every performance, every minute of every performance was an improvisation. And
how did you, like, in those settings? How did you learn to get out of your own way? Because for me, like knowing that if it was me, knowing that I had a very small amount of time and there were people chomping at the bit to get back on, you know, to solo, get back in the groove. Sometimes I'd, you know, be too much in my head. Do you remember how you learned to, like, sort of, instead of being resentful for a limited amount of solo time,
I was never resentful.
Yeah, maybe that's the wrong word, but how you learned to be almost a vessel in the limited time that
Well, I think, you know, it's interesting. One of the guys in the band, Benny Maupin.
Yeah.
In fact, I just had lunch with him last week. Benny, when what's his name, was writing the book about the band. Oh God.
Oh yeah, Gluck. Bob Gluck, yeah.
Bob Gluck, when he was interviewing Benny, Benny said if it had been any, this was such a compliment I felt. He said if it had been any other white man, it would not have worked. You know, because this was Black Power and all.
Hey man, I get it.
Yeah, and you know what the guys did say was that I followed their lead and fell in with what they were doing, and joined in.
Sure.
Became. In fact, when we were recording, I think it was some overdubs on Sextant. A couple of guys in the studio were clowning around, and there was a very funny group, very funny. At least one of the guys could have been a stand-up comedian.
Sure.
And so Billy Hart comes in, the drummer, into the studio, into the control room where I'm both monitoring what the guys are doing, getting ready to record them, and then laughing about what they were saying. And Billy, who has a very dry sense of humor, he said, "I don't know what you're laughing about, brother. You're into this shit deeper than anybody," which was also a compliment. You know, I took it as
absolutely, man. You were adding colors and textures to this palette. I mean,
Yeah,
and you did it in a tasteful way. It wasn't like you were stepping on people's toes.
No.
So they respected that because
Yeah.
it was a very delicate ballad. That music was as funky and cool as it was. It was delicate.
It really required listening.
Exactly.
And you know,
And they knew you were listening. You had big ears.
Yeah.
they
And of
respected
course,
it.
at that time, you know, what I was doing, it was so early in the game that at the local level in San Francisco, people didn't really quite understand what had happened.
Right.
And a couple of guys that, you know, probably had more musical skills than I did in some ways, kept, you know, telling me, you know, let me sit in with the band and so forth. And I tried not to, they were white guys, and I tried not to do it. And then they were so insistent. I went to Herbie, I said, well, this guy wants to sit in. And Herbie said, well, let's give it a try. You never know. And of course, it was a disaster. We did it twice, and after the second time, I never dared do it again. And then, but the guy finally, this one guy finally got it, because he came to me about a year later and apologized for even asking to be to sit in. And he said, I didn't realize what you were doing, and I didn't respect it, and I thought I could add something, and I was wrong. So,
this is really important. I know you just, I dropped the news on you today, but can you talk to younger cats specifically about the late great Klaus Schulze and his significance or his impact, and maybe your relationship with him?
I never had a relationship with
You never
Klaus.
hung with him with the Stomu band?
No, I was with Go after he was.
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, how did he influence you?
I knew his work, of course. Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that he passed.
Well, how was he a pioneer? You know, these people, you know, like you, everyone gets caught up in it's all about being original and different. It's not about, that to me is the level of success. So how, in your mind, what made him a pioneer?
Well, he was part of a small group of mostly Berlin-based, Michael Honig, certainly, who were part of this kind of, what did they call it? They had a name for it, which was a little bit incorrect. I can't remember. Krautrock.
Yeah, that is not the correct, but yeah, I get it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, that was what it was called at the time.
Krautrock.
Krautrock. And it involved sequencers, you know. And, you know, Klaus was, of course, wonderful at it. No more so than Michael Honig. Yeah, Michael had a wonderful album, which is still very listenable today, called Journey from the Northern Wasteland.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was on Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers heard what he was doing and picked it up, and boom, there he was. So yeah, that was. I never exactly wanted to do that music, but I liked it and I respected it and enjoyed, you know, listening to it.
When you say it was sequenced, you appreciated it and respected it, but didn't want to do it because it lacked kind of an improvisational flair to a degree?
Not even that. I mean, it was, you know, first of all, in the band I was in, I mean, to sequence something and impose my tempo and rhythm on the band would have been instant
Death. Eddie Harris.
Yeah. And so, when we did the second album that I was on, Sextant, there is one tune which is highly sequenced, and it's a little bit like what Michael and Klaus were doing, adjacent to it, I would say.
Which tune was it?
I don't
You
even
remember?
remember.
Yeah.
No, I don't remember the tune. I can't. What was it called? Raindrops. Rain Dance.
All right, yeah, we'll check that out. Yo, so you know, it's been a minute, but I wanted you to talk about. We just went through some of this this work you've been doing with visual, and I wanted you to talk about, like, I guess maybe the merging of, in so many ways, it's like Billy Hart. You talk about him. You listen to him he's painting on the drums.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, most cats, even if they're whatever genre of music, when they're really grooving, they're painting. And you sort of told me before, that, you know, this all sort of fits together because you used to be a painter.
Yeah.
So I just wanted you to talk about the inspiration for this new project.
Well, interesting. It just seemed to me, for one thing, as I began this doing video synthesis about a year ago, it just seemed to me, you know, a lot of the bigger performers already have visuals that accompany their performance, and also a coming thing is going to be surround sound. Probably it'll be Atmos. I'm using a program by my producer, an extraordinarily bright guy, scary bright, he got some money from, I think, the National Science Foundation to develop a quadraphonic app that would, when you put it in a stereo environment, it plays accurately in stereo. When you put it in a quad environment, it plays accurately in quad. The same tracks.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's called, he's got a sense of humor. It's called Quark. So that's the hardware, the software I'm using for in Ableton. I'm using it within Ableton Live. But it just seemed to me that with the development of these big stage shows with visuals, that it soon was going to filter down so that people like me or individual performers really would be expected to have a visual component.
Sure. No, yeah. Have you considered like 8mm photography or like talk about these visual? These is all computer based graphics.
Yeah. Well, the performance version of the album, which is what I'm getting ready to perform.
Yes.
Live, is based very closely on the record. It's not quite the same thing because I wanted to leave room for improvisation. And then with that, I needed to have the ability to have visuals that were synchronized to specific moments within the audio performance.
Got it.
And I found some wonderful software. There's a young guy in Amsterdam that has a little program that you can put into Ableton, and it makes Ableton think that it's recording audio, but it's actually recording video.
Wow.
It's a little complicated. To get from the idea to the performance takes 5 different programs.
Wow.
It'll be simpler, obviously, very soon.
And the performance is, well, you're giving, do you know the date? I just want to make sure this gets out to people.
Well, this is going to be first presented at Synthplex, and I don't know what the exact date of the performance is. They've given me a date for a little presentation or interactive talk, which is for the 29th of October. And they've given it, so early days, they've given me 2 completely different times for it. So I won't tell you the time, but it's coming at Synthplex. It's going to be at the Burbank Convention Center. And it'll be a 3 or 4 day run of
Symposium.
musicians and talks about.
How I want you to talk about, like, at this point in your career, sometimes if you're younger, you have so much information you want to share. It can come across. You can come across as a braggart, or get over your skis. I mean, you're definitely an elder statesman.
Well, I'm an elder anyway.
Well, and I just wanted to know what your. I don't approach anything with expectations anymore. Just intentions.
Yeah.
So, like, what are your intentions for doing in your presentation? What do you hope to get across?
Well, the very first thing I'm going to do, and I have to talk to Michael Boddicker, who's the producer.
He still won't come on my program, dude.
Huh?
He needs to come on the Jake Feinberg show.
I'll give it.
Let him know.
I'll give it a
Yeah,
shake.
yeah.
I'll give it a shake. We'll
Thank
see.
you, dude.
Um,
So you got to talk to Boddicker.
I'll talk to Boddicker because what I want is my producer to be there with me, because this guy is technologically a place that I would never even aspire to.
And he's a freak of nature.
Do you know what he's doing now? He's also consulting with NASA.
Yeah, he's in the intergalactic.
Yeah. So,
So you get with them. You got to get with them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping it'll be the 2 of us, and that'll be an interesting. He's also a very amiable guy for a guy that's, I don't know what you call him, a genius, but yeah, let's just say he's a genius. He's so affable. He's like the man that died last week.
And Mike Lang.
Mike Lang.
Thank you for throwing that in.
He's a friend to everybody, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, no, before we wrap, just talk a little bit about, I'm glad you brought him up because unfortunately I didn't have him on my podcast, but I did interview him. But can you just talk about, a good Mike Lang memory for you?
Oh, gosh. Mike, it's too bad you didn't get a chance to interview him. Well, when I first came down from San Francisco and started scoring, it wasn't the case that the LA music community instantly accepted you.
Right.
And in fact, the very first series that I managed to cop, one of the guys that was up for it, the producer of the series laughed about it and told him that the guy phoned him angry. Why are you using somebody like Pat Gleeson? He's never done anything.
Novice.
Yeah, he's novice. And just really outraged at the impropriety of having this, green guy. So there was that. Of course, at a level of John Williams, nobody was concerned. but at the bottom
Sure.
of the scale, which is where you enter, there's a lot of people striving and a lot of people failing, and there's bad feelings, and there's not a lot
You're
of...
trying to get up above the sewer. They're trying
Yeah,
to pull you back down.
yeah,
Like he's getting ahead. He's getting
exactly.
ahead, man.
Exactly. So I had some orchestral dates early on because they were still kind of pretending
Yeah.
that these series were orchestral, although they weren't, and which is what gave me my opening.
When you say series, you mean like, because I've seen like nature LPs that you were on. When you talk,
this is stuff like Knots Landing.
okay, so they were doing it in a, what was the word you just used? They orchestral, but it wasn't really.
No,
Okay.
but at the beginning of the season, they would have a full orchestra to do the theme, and then there were various occasions where, for one reason or another, I would be, not very often, but be conducting an orchestra, and I have zero conducting skills, and people were not nice about it. And
Totally.
And here's these experienced guys that are sitting in studios, 5 days a week, every week of the year, recording with, for people like John Williams and so forth. And here comes this guy they've never seen before, waving his hands in the air. They were not kind, and they really did not make it easy for you. I mean, I remember one session where I had this guy. He thought it would be a good joke on this newbie if he would keep standing up as if he were going to take a solo, and just to unsettle me, and then he would sit down again. And
Totally just head games. Head games.
Yeah, head games. So, but among all that, Mike Lang was the guy who, would give me a friendly nod and would come up and say, "I liked what you did here," and so forth and so on. I mean, it's just very friendly. And of course, Mike was probably the most qualified guy in the fucking studio. He played on over 30,000 scores.
I did not know that.
Yeah, 30,000 scores.
Oh.
More than 30,000. So,
In the Jewish culture, we would say he's kind of almost a mensch.
oh yeah. Well, that's a wonderful word for him, because he was truly, in every sense, a mensch.
Yeah.
I mean, he was soulful. He was approachable. He was a teacher. He had such both skills and native attributes that he was always in a position where he could probably turn around and tell the next guy something that would help him musically, and he did in the nicest way.
That's, as we wrap up here, it's so, can you just talk about like your philosophy? I feel like you've always been, just how important is it to share your genius, share your knowledge, pass it on, don't hoard it. I mean, we live in this time now, everything's, and I'm not just talking about music, it's just a lot of secrecy, guarding, litigious stuff. But how have you kept your heart open to always want to pass it forward?
Well, I'll tell you something. This is a little change of direction, but it's not really. So the pandemic has been particularly hard on us in some ways because of Trump and the fact that my wife is African American, and it's been it's been depressing. So I've been in therapy for the last few months, and again, as I told you, we're thinking of moving to Europe. It depends on what happens in the November elections, although I'm not at all hopeful. But
Even with that, you still remain able to share and not be resentful or.
well, here's the thing I've discovered, and I was talking with my therapist. She said, Pat, it sounds to me like the thing that takes you out of any depressive feelings you have is when you do something for somebody else. I said, God, you're absolutely right. and so that that afternoon, our therapy is in the morning. That afternoon, I happened to be going to Trader Joe's, and I made a point of being helpful to other people. And I left, and I was in a state of near euphoria. So, the best way to survive all this is, to be a mensch.
Dr. Gleeson, man, I will be back in October for that symposium and that performance, man. It's so great to see you again.
Great to see you.
Continued success, my friend.
Thank you.
It's the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you later.